The night was freezing over London, one of those winter nights where the wind bites at the skin and frost covers the windows. The city, usually vibrant, seemed frozen under a mantle of winter silence, disturbed only by the wind whistling between the buildings. Yet Ethan wasn't cold as he stepped into Sophie's apartment. He was far too warm with adrenaline and excitement. Their encounters were a succession of stolen moments, guilty shivers, and passionate embraces that defied the monotony of daily life. Each rendezvous was a dance between desire and caution, a desperate attempt to prolong this forbidden escape. He knew every corner of this apartment as if it were his own. Sophie's intoxicating scent lingering in the sheets, the dim glow of the lamps casting sensual shadows on the walls, and the couch where they had shared so many feverish kisses. That night, they had promised not to rush, to savor every moment in the warmth of their secret haven. Sophie was waiting for him, wrapped in a simple silk robe, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. She pulled him close without a word, her fingers sliding over his chest with burning familiarity. The moment was perfect, suspended in time, far from the outside world and its heavy responsibilities. But fate had other plans. A sharp noise, the creak of a key turning in the lock. Ethan's heart leapt in his chest, and his breath caught. Sophie instantly paled, her fingers tightening around the fabric of her robe. "It's impossible. He wasn't supposed to be back until tomorrow morning," she whispered, her voice trembling with barely contained panic. Her eyes widened in terror as the heavy footsteps in the hallway confirmed their worst fears. Her husband was home. Ethan's mind raced. There was no escape, no hiding place in this apartment that was far too minimalist. Every second counted. In a sudden movement, Sophie grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the glass doors leading to the balcony. "Hurry!" she hissed, her hands shaking as she unlocked the sliding door. Her frantic gaze pleaded with Ethan to move quickly. The cold immediately rushed into the room as the door opened, biting at Ethan's bare skin like 1,000 icy blades. He didn't have time to protest. With a desperate push, Sophie shoved him outside and slid the door shut behind him with a sharp snap. He found himself barefoot on the frozen concrete of the balcony, his breath forming white clouds in the freezing air. The sound of the lock turning inside rang in his ears like a final hammer blow. Inside, her husband's voice echoed, "Sophie, why is the window open?" Ethan's heart pounded against his ribs. He pressed himself against the wall, his body racked with uncontrollable shivers. He knew that a single wrong move, one careless sound, and everything would come crashing down. On the other side of the glass, Sophie struggled to maintain her composure. "Oh, I just wanted to air out the room," she answered with a nervous laugh. Ethan closed his eyes, trying to steady his ragged breathing. He had to hold out. But for how long? The cold gnawed at his skin, each gust of wind attacking him from every angle. His toes, numb, seemed to be losing all sensation. He tried to rub his arms for warmth, but the movement was too abrupt. His foot slipped on a thin layer of ice. He barely managed to grab onto the railing, his heart skipping a beat. The metallic sound echoed through the night, slicing through the silence like a blade. Ethan held his breath, eyes locked on the apartment interior. Sophie's husband had stopped mid-sentence, his brow furrowed. "What was that?" he asked, his tone suspicious. Sophie stiffened but forced a light laugh. "Just a gust of wind," The night is freezing, you know." But Ethan knew that every second brought him closer to the moment when his frozen body would betray him. He had to find a way out, and fast. Inside, Sophie's husband swept his gaze across the room as if searching for something amiss. "Are you sure?" he asked, hesitant. "Of course. Do you want something to drink?" she added quickly, hoping to divert his attention. He paused, then finally shrugged before collapsing onto the couch. Outside, Ethan felt his limbs growing dangerously numb. The cold was paralyzing his fingers, the pain turning into an alarming numbness. He knew he wouldn't last much longer. Each icy breath burned his lungs. He had to act. He glanced downward. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. Jumping was out of the question. He turned his head toward the neighboring balcony, barely a meter away. If he could reach it, maybe he could knock on the window and ask for help. He took a deep breath and, gathering his strength, he tried to climb onto the railing. His heart pounded violently. Just a small jump. But his foot slipped again. This time, he couldn't catch himself. His scream tore through the night as he tipped forward. By some miracle, his frozen fingers managed to grip the railing of the neighboring balcony. He dangled there for what felt like an eternity before pulling himself up onto the platform. Behind the glass, an elderly woman in a bathrobe stared at him, wide-eyed. Ethan raised a trembling hand in a placating gesture. "Ma'am, please help me." His breath formed small white clouds in the freezing air. The woman hesitated for a moment, then slowly stepped back and reached for her phone. Ethan blanched. "No, wait!" But it was too late. 5 minutes later, sirens wailed through the street, tearing apart the silence of the night. Ethan, still clinging to the railing of the neighboring balcony, felt his stomach twist. He realized he had no way out. Down below, flashing blue and red lights illuminated the building's facade, casting shifting shadows on the walls. When he saw the beams of flashlights pointing at him and heard the voices of firefighters, he closed his eyes in resignation. Fear gripped him, but he knew he had no choice but to cooperate. A ladder was swiftly deployed, its metal scraping against the building. 2 rescue workers, clad in thick gear, climbed up with impressive agility. "Are you all right, sir? Can you move?" one of them asked, his voice firm yet reassuring. Ethan nodded, ashamed. He felt strong hands grip him and help him down, each rung of the ladder feeling like another step toward his public humiliation. As soon as he set foot on the ground, a police officer approached and grabbed his arm firmly. His scrutinizing gaze left no room for doubt. He wanted answers. "What were you doing up there?" Ethan searched for words, his mind sluggish from the cold and panic. What could he say? Admit he had been fleeing his lover's husband? That he had ended up stranded on a balcony in the dead of winter, dressed like a condemned man? Adrenaline still pulsed through his veins, but no believable excuse came to him. He lowered his gaze and muttered the only thing that crossed his mind. I lost my keys." The officer raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "The old lady says she doesn't know you. Are you sure this is your place?" Ethan shrank in on himself, trying to hide his shivers. He wasn't sure if it was just the cold making him tremble anymore. Around him, a few neighbors, woken by the commotion, watched from their windows. Some whispered among themselves, others pointed their phones at him, recording every humiliating second. The story would undoubtedly spread across the neighborhood, maybe even online before the day was over. And in the apartment next door, behind barely parted curtains, Sophie held her breath, praying that her husband wouldn't suspect a thing. Every passing second felt like an eternity. She knew that if he discovered the truth, everything would come crashing down. Now it's your turn. Have you ever experienced such an embarrassing situation? Share your story in the comments. Moral of the story: infidelity often leads to uncontrollable and humiliating situations. The adrenaline of the forbidden may seem thrilling, but it can also leave you quite literally and metaphorically freezing on a stranger's balcony. Think twice before crossing the line.